recording. Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Adu. I'm one of the methodology experts. So today we're going to talk about the planning and action research. And this presentation will be limited to just examining the action research characteristics and also the process and the component. So this is just to give you a basic understanding of action research and how you could be innovative in doing action research. I'm trying to present in such a way that we don't have a one way of doing action research, right? There are multiple ways, and I'm going to expose you to all the various ways that you could do action research. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them for you. So this is just the outline. So I'm going to give you a definition of action research and how it's different from the traditional research. And I'm also going to talk about action research process, right? And I'm going to give you information about the various components of action research. So I just want to try to break things down for you to understand what action research is all about. Just think about it this way. You are doing the research and then you are taking action after the research, right? So you don't stop there when you have your findings. You develop an action plan to address the problem that you identify, right? So you do research, you do the normal research that you are doing, right? But you're going to take action based on the results, right? So action research is all about research plus action. So the research part is, you are collecting data, you are analyzing and interpreting the data, right? And the action part is where you identify a practical problem, right? You identify or examine or generate practical problem. Practical problem is a problem that you are directly or indirectly facing in your profession, right? And then based on a practical problem, you generate potential solutions, right? And then you collect data maybe about a problem or about a solution in terms of efficacy of the solution or to know more about the problem, right? After that, you analyze your data, you arrive at your findings, and then based on the finding, you create a solution, right? We call it a plan of action to solve the problem that you identified originally, the potential problem, right? So this is all about action research. And there are three main things that you have to know about the difference between action research and traditional research. The first is the problem, right? As I said, you identify potential or practical problems that you are facing in your profession or in your field. Practical problem, something that is happening, that you can see, that you can talk about. And the traditional one, the problem most of the time is identified in the literature, right? When you review literature, you examine what is really going on, and based on the literature, you identify a gap in the literature, and then you conduct research to fill that gap, right? And then the main goal of action research is to address the practical problem that you have identified. At the end of the day, you want to improve the professional practice, improve the services that you are providing to maybe your client, right? In order to improve the services, you identify a problem, do research, and then based on the results, you develop a plan to address the problem that you have identified. Traditional research, as I said, you identify a gap, conduct research to fill those gaps that you identify if it's more than one gap, and then you contribute to the field, right? So you do your contribution to the knowledge in the field. Well, how do you do that? Because you have identified a gap in the literature that has not been filled. When you fill a gap, you are contributing to the knowledge of the field, right, in the field. And then in terms of the level of involvement of participants, most of the time the action research, um, you directly involve participants from the start, especially when you want to identify a problem. So you identify a problem and find out who are affected by this problem. And then you talk to those who are affected. They will tell you about what they feel, how they see the problem, and then so you from the start to the end of data to the end of the study, you involve participants in the study. It's very different from the traditional one where you only involve participants during the data collection stage most of the time, right? When you're going to collect data, you recruit participants, you interview them, or you give them the survey to complete, and then you analyze it and present your results. So these are the three main characteristics that concerning action research that you might have to learn more about and know the difference between them. Um, so I just want to stop here if you have any question because I just want you to understand this basic information about action research before I go on. So do you have any question for me? If you have a question, you can type in or you can, unmute yourself and ask, and I'll be happy to address that. So, do you not see the difference between action research and traditional research?
There's a question, does action research lend itself more to qualitative, where we are more invested in the participant's story?
Yes, yeah, we can say that most of the action research are more of a qualitative because you want to sometimes explore the problems. Sometimes you don't know the exact variables involved. You just want to know how participant feels or how a participant are affected by the problem. So you want to know their opinion. So most of the action research, they do a they use qualitative approach, but some of them use quantitative, but most of them use because it's more of, as you said, participants telling their stories about how the problem is they have been affected by the problem.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question. How do you suggest students qualify the practical problem, whereas in the traditional research you're drawing from the literature? What do you suggest here?
Yes, so I'll be talking about the characteristics of the practical problem. So, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I'll be talking about that, the characteristics of practical problem, and then when we reach there, I think your question will be answered.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Any other question for me?
There was a follow-up. Are we literally employing the participants in problem solving?
Yes, in the sense that you are solving, especially if participants are directly affected by the problem, you want to involve them in understanding the problem and also bringing solutions because at the end of the day, they will be part of the solution, right? You want to solve the problem so if you don't get their opinions, if you don't get their perception, if you don't get more information about what they think about a problem, it's very difficult for you to develop a solution that will be able to accomplish or solve the problem. So involving them is very, very important in action research. Okay, so can I go on? Okay, so I think we are talking about the difference between action research and traditional research. So let me give you this one is um, just to get a big picture of action research process. So look at here. So we move from here. We are doing action research. It involves three processes. We have proactive process, reactive process, and innovative process. And I'm going to talk about the various processes. The dominant process that you might have seen is the reactive process, where you are doing your job in your field, and then as you are carrying out your doing your job, you identify a specific problem or you encounter a problem, right? And then because you have encountered a problem, you want to understand more about the problem, so you conduct action research and maybe understand the problem at the same time, develop a solution to solve the problem. We call it reactive. You are reacting to what you have encountered. Right. And a proactive means that you are seeking for the problem. So you go around as you are reflecting concerning your practice, you may identify a problem that you want to solve. Right. So you are seeking for the problem, and then when you identify the problem, you take action or you conduct action research. Right. Innovative is more of maybe you are reading a literature or reading information about best practices and you identify a specific technique or a solution that you could use in your profession, right? You haven't identified a problem yet, but you have seen a very innovative solution. So you look around, reflect on your practice, and identify a problem that a solution that you have seen could address the problem. You are being innovative because you are generating a problem based on the solution you have identified. And I'll talk more about that. So if you don't get it now, hold on. You're going to, go through all the three processes. So, and then you identify your action, the action research problem. Then you take action by doing research. And these are some of the purposes. So you can do research by examining the features of the problem. You can do research by involving participants in generating the solution. You can do research by assessing the efficacy of a potential solution that you have identified or you have come up with. And sometimes you can do research just to understand the problem, because without understanding the problem, you can't solve it. Right. So it's very important to know where you are. If you want to do research, are you doing research to understand the problem, or you are doing research to solve the problem, right, that you have identified? Then you arrive at action research findings, and based on the findings, you go to action research solution. You take an action, right? You develop an action plan based on the findings, and then you carry out the action plan to solve the problem that you have identified. So you see how the cyclical process, right? You have a problem, you conduct research, you develop your findings, and then you create your solution, the action plan, and then you solve the problem by implementing it. Do you need any clarification here before I go on? Does it seem complex?
There's a question as to whether you've published an article that includes this diagram.
Oh, no, not yet. I developed it based on the textbook that I read concerning action research. And then the textbook talks about only the two processes, the proactive and reactive. And I realized that I think another process that the textbook didn't talk about is innovative process, right? So this is what I came up with, and maybe I'll write an article one day to reflect this process. So, but you can cite this one, and you can even use the diagram if by citing me if you want to use the diagram. Okay. The next one that we have to talk about is the process, each of the process, the reactive process, proactive and innovative process. So let's talk about reactive, right? So you are in your profession, right, doing what you are supposed to do. Maybe you are a mental health professional taking care of patients with mental health issues, right? And as you are taking care of them, you encounter a problem, right? That is existing, right? You encounter an existing problem. So what do you have to do? if you don't know much about a problem in terms of the cause of the problem, who are involved, and what has been done to solve the problem, then you can do research to examine the problem, right? To know more about the problem. Because without knowing more about the problem, you can't create a solution. So you can do research either to know more about the problem. If you know a lot about the problem that you have encountered, then you can do research to come up with a solution. How do you do that? You can, you can look into literature that have been done concerning things that have been done concerning the problem in terms of solving the problem, or you can interview participants to come up with, a solution to solve that problem that you have identified. Right, we call it participatory action research. You are involving them to either understand the problem or develop a solution to solve the problem. Do research. After you have done research and you have your findings, what do? You develop action plan. Then you implement the plan to solve the problem, right? So reactive, because you are reacting to what you have encountered. So one example that you can, maybe you're a mental health professional, and then you realize that small number of participants are seeking mental health treatment, right? In your location, the community that you are working in, you can see that there's a lot of mental health issues, but only few people are accessing the mental health services. And then those even who are accessing mental health services, there's high rate of dropout in terms of treatment. That's what you have encountered. So what can you do? Maybe if you don't know much about the problem, what you could do is to do research to better understand why people are not accessing the treatment. Why are there a lot of dropouts in terms of the treatment? Right. So this is what you have to think about when you're doing that. If you know more about the problem, maybe sometimes you have to read literature because there are a lot of best practices around that you can read and learn more about the problem, why there might be low or high dropout or small number of participants seeking for mental health services. Based on that, if you understand the problem, then your research could be developing a solution. How are you going to develop a solution? Look at those people who are involved. Mental health professionals, clients. You can interview them and think about, okay, well, so what is the best way that we can use we can help you to always come for treatment, right? Or you can interview mental health professionals and see see the solutions that they can give you. And based on that, you can develop action plan, and then you implement the action plan and to solve the problem. So this is a reactive. You are reacting to what you have faced. Proactive, right, is, okay, you haven't technically faced any problem, but it's good to always reflect your profession and see your actions and actions of others and see what is going on and see whether you are doing the right thing, right? In the way of reflection, you came up with a problem or you sought for a problem, right? What do you have to do next? You can do research to know more about a problem or can do research to come up with a solution, right? And then when you come up with a solution, then you take action, you develop an action plan, and then you implement the action or implement the plan. So you are being proactive. You don't wait for the problem to come. You seek for the problem. Okay. So the same example, mental health professional in the community. The problem is you haven't identified any problem that you are reflecting on the services that you are providing to participants, right? Based on your reflection on the services that you are providing to participants, you realize that maybe some of the aspect of the service needs to be improved, right? So you can do research to find out, so what aspect of the service that we have to improve, right? You are being proactive. You don't wait for the problem to come to solve it. You look for the problem and solve it. So that's all about proactive action research. Innovative action research is where you generate a problem based on the potential solution. How do you do that? So as you interact with other people, we go to conferences, you listen to people presenting, you realize that, okay, there's a new innovative way of taking care of patients in terms of providing support or services to mental health patients, right, that you haven't used before. But it looks like it's very promising. What do you have to do? So you could do action research by going back and generating a problem that the innovative technique can solve, and then you conduct research to see the efficacy of the solution or the technique that you are implementing. And do research concerning that. So this one, you don't start with the problem, you start with the solution. You didn't have any problem. Everything's going on well with your profession. But when you went to a conference or you are reading a literature concerning best practices, new information comes. What can you do? You can do action research by generating a problem that this solution can solve, if I can put it that way. And then you can conduct research either to better understand the problem that the solution has or to see whether the technique could work or the solution will work. If it works, then you develop an action plan and then you implement it. So that's why you are very innovative. So I think the same thing, mental health professional, and then maybe the person was reading literature and realized that, oh, I think creative arts therapy may be the best, is one of the best way of taking care of mental health patients, right? So the person wasn't using that. So the person want to use the current therapy and find out whether it's effective or not, right? So you can do actual research to find out whether this new technique is effective or not. And I think there's a question coming in. Kuba, you want to help with the question?
Right, there is a question about would this be the approach of the pharmaceutical companies? They find drugs and then try to convince the public they need the drugs.
Yes, it could be, because the thing is that they haven't identified a problem yet, right? But they think that maybe the existing drug is not doing much work, right? Maybe there's an existing high blood pressure drug that is helping, but the new one is more effective. So they have to convince the public or the doctors who are going to prescribe the medicine that is very effective. So they can do innovative action research. They have identified a problem. What is the problem? The old one is not effective, right? That's the problem. The old one is not effective. We have to develop a new effective one. So you have to do action research, and this is where they show to the doctors, they show to the public by doing some trials and saying that, okay, I think doing this trial, this is an effective way compared to the old one. So they're going to have two groups: those who are going to take the old drug and those who are going to take the new drug, and see the effectiveness of it. So it could be innovative action research. Proactive action research is where maybe there's a disease that has come, and then not the proactive, the first one, which is the reactive. The disease that comes, like Ebola, and when at a time they didn't have any way of treating it, right? So they have to do research and try to solve that problem or develop a drug to solve the disease or to solve the problem that they identified. So that could be the not innovative but reactive. They are reacting to the problem. So think about your study, right, and see, are you going to do a reactive action research? Are you going to do innovative action research? Are you going to do proactive action research? Knowing this, the process helps you to conceptualize your the data collection process and analysis and the process. Where do you have to start from? Do I have to start from the problem, or do I have to start from the solution? Right. So it's very important to know the process that your study will follow, so that you can do things accordingly in terms of doing the research. Okay, so I think we can move on. If there's no question, we can move on to the next one. So let's talk about the components of action research. Depending on the book that you're going to read, they have different ways of presenting the components of action research. But based on what I've read and based on what I've learned, I think that I always want to simplify things for my audience. So just look at action research as in 4 areas, right? We have a problem, right? And then you are doing research to either understand the problem or solve the problem, right? Then you have your findings, right, in terms of the solution, and you develop action plan and you take action. And when you take action, then you have to evaluate and see whether the action that you took is effective or not. So that's all about action research. So you don't, when you're doing action research, you don't have to do all these things in terms of some people can start with the problem and collect data, analyze, and then get a result and propose and make propose ways of solving a problem. That's the action plan, and they stop there, right? So you can do research. It's action research where you start with the problem and end with a solution. And then maybe future researchers can continue by implementing your action plan and evaluating and see whether it's effective or not. That's also an action research. So you don't have to go through everything that we have here. But the most important thing is that you have to do research. Whether you have a solution that you want to verify whether it's working or not, or you have a problem that you want to learn more about it. Right. So think about it this way. You start with a problem, you do research, you get your solution, and you take action. So what are some of the characteristics of a problem? As I already said, the problem, action research problem, normally are problems that happen in the you have identified in a natural setting, right? Something that is really happening in your profession, right? What you are doing, you think about what you are doing, what is really going on in terms of something that is problematic, right? And it should be specific, right? It's not like abstract things. It should be specific and something happening in a specific environment. And it should be specific and also narrow in nature. And then you could use literature to refine your problem, right? So there are some problems that is very difficult for you to do research. So you have to read literature so that you get some of the concepts and maybe theories to help you to narrow down the problem a little bit so that it can be researchable, right? Not all practical problems can be researchable. You have to, that's why it's always important for you to read the literature and see what is going on. Maybe best practices or theories that could be used to better understand the problem or conceptualize the problem, right? And sometimes, exploring the best practices could also help you to refine the problem. So you start with the practical problem and you go to researchable problem, right? So there are some practical problems, as I said, that cannot be researchable. You have to think about what are the best way to research that problem, right? You sometimes have to do some kind of reflection. You have to you review literature, and that will help you to think about ways of narrowing down your focus. Any question coming?
There's a question that just came in. Even if after our data analysis, if our research doesn't necessarily support the solution we foresee that the research was to explore or verify, we can still proceed with a plan for a solution, yes? and continue researching because perhaps our sample had limitations?
Oh, yes, you could do that. The most important thing is that, so let's say you, let me give you the same example about the art therapy for mental health, solving mental health issues, right? Maybe you did research and then you realize, no, the art therapy is not working, right? So what can you do? You can make a recommendation that, okay, I think this one is not working. Maybe we have to look at in different way. You can propose an action plan based on the fact that this one is not working. Maybe there's a need to maybe adjust the technique in such a way that it suits the culture of the people that you are focusing on. So that's why you always do a research. Sometimes it will come out like the action might not be working, right? And you have to find ways of, coming up with a solution that is much consistent with the problem, but at the same time, you know that it might work. So action research is like a cyclical process because when you have your action plan and then you implement the plan, right, you might face another problem that you have to do research and then develop another action plan. And so it's non-stop. It's a continuous process. So where you reach might not be um, a very effective way of solving the problem, but we all know that maybe solution doesn't work. So we have to look around, either adjust the current solution or throw all the solution out and then look for other things. So we know there's always a positive side of when something doesn't work. It tells us that, okay, we shouldn't use it, right? We should think about alternative. So not all the time that the solution might work. You may have to make an adjustment and then based on the result, you can make recommendations. I hope I've answered your question. Okay. So then we can move on to the next one. So how do you narrow down your action research problem? Right. So because you have to move from the practical problem to a researchable problem. So what do? You just have to brainstorm and ask yourself some questions. You think about a problem and think about what is the current situation, right? What is really going on currently concerning the problem? What are the factors or conditions that are causing the problem? What are the potential solutions? So asking yourself these questions and trying to answer them will help you to think about which aspect of the problem should I address in my study, right? Who are involved? Who are affected? Who are concerned about this problem? What are the evidence to show that this problem exists, right? So you ask yourself all these questions that help you. Okay, I think this practical problem is so huge. Let me focus on only this aspect and do research and see what is going on. Or let me come up with a solution that will solve this aspect of a problem. So always think about moving from the practical problem to a researchable problem, right? By asking a lot of yourself some questions, and then you can even use literature to try to support, to help you to refine your questions or where you want to focus on. I have a YouTube video here that explains how you come up with your question. I think is very informative. So if you get a chance, you can email me. I can send you the link, and I can even send you the PowerPoint just to help you to see learn more about how to make your problem researchable. So. And then, so we are moving on to, we have talked about the problem, we told us to talk about research, right? So action research has a lot of similarity with your ordinary research. You should have after you have developed your researchable problem, you have to come up with your purpose statement, what exactly you want to do in a study. What do you want to find out in the study? And then based on what you want to find out, what specific question do you plan to address in your study? Right? So there should be a consistency across. The problem should be, the purpose should be consistent with the problem. The research question should be consistent with the purpose. The methodology, whether it's a qualitative method, quantitative method, or mixed method, right? What research method do you think you could use to help you to address the research question that you have? Data collection strategy. Are you going to interview participants? Are you going to do some surveys? Are you going to measure some variables? What kind of variable do you want to measure, right? What instrument are you going to use to do that? Do you want to do focus groups? You want to do document analysis? So these are the questions you're going to ask yourself so that at the end of the day, you want to collect rich information to address your research question that you have. How are you going to analyze your data? Are you going to do qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, or mixed methods? How are you going to do that? So at the end of the day, there should be consistency across, and then based on the analysis, you think about, okay, how would your findings look like? And would the findings help you to address your research question that you have? Right. There's a question here. This does not differ from the traditional process. Yeah. So it's the same thing as a traditional process, right? So what you have learned about research, you apply it here, because the only difference is that you are dealing with a practical problem that is really happening right now, or problem that is happening, is not abstract, right? It's so specific, but you're going to use the same technique that you use for the traditional research. So the next one is the solution. So after you've analyzed your data, you come up with your findings, right? Then how are the findings addressing your research question, right? Ask yourself that. And then based on the findings, you come up with an action plan. What should be done? What action should we take in order to address the problem that you have identified? What action? So you list, based on the finding, you list the specific action that should be taken, right? And the last one is the action itself, right? How are you going to implement the action plan or the solution? And then when you implement, you don't end there. You have to assess whether it's effective or not, whether it's addressing the problem that you identify or not. That is where the evaluation comes in. You evaluate. You can do evaluation by finding out from participants what they think about the new solutions. You can evaluate by maybe having maybe two groups, those who are using the new methodology, new solution, and those who are using the old solution, and see, compare and see what is going on. So you always have to evaluate, and based on the evaluation, you think about, okay, so what is the findings concerning evaluation? What should we do? So you see how the issue of cyclical processes, you don't end there. You start all over again. At the end of the day, you want to improve your professional practice, and you don't want to end there by just implementing and then it works. So you're going to use the practice. You continue to think about your new solutions and trying to see whether there's another problem that is coming up, unintended consequences, right? And then how do you solve that? So it's a process, and I'm giving all this information so that you will not think about action research as one way having your problem, doing research and taking action. You can start from anywhere. You can start from even the action part of it, implementing something that has already been the action plan that has already been developed, and then you go ahead and evaluate and see whether it's working or not. So in conclusion, as I said, there are a variety of ways to view action research and also to conduct action research. as you can see, this is a simple one. You have your problem, you do research, you develop solution, and you take action. Sometimes you have identified a solution, you do research to find out the effectiveness of the solution, and then you see whether there's problem happening, and maybe you have to conduct more research and understand the problem and take action. Sometimes you start from the problem and then go straight and then take action, right? You collect data at the middle here to understand the problem, and then you involve participants to help you to come up with a solution, and you take action. Sometimes you start with a potential problem, an innovative way of solving a problem, and then you want to identify a problem that you could use the solution to solve. Or you can start with the potential problem and then take action, develop an action plan, and then find out what is going on with that. And then you can implement the action plan and see whether the solution is solving the problem or not. So this is the quote that I made up here. The ultimate goal of conducting action research is to examine our practices, improve our professional practices, and share our best practices, right? So you always have to examine your practice, reflect what you are doing. My profession is to provide support to students. I always reflect upon my profession, the service that I'm providing to students. We collect data from students to find out how they think about our services, so that we always reflect and improve our services. If you don't do that, there might be problems that you might not know, and before you realize, your service is not helping students, right? And then we always want to share our best practices. And Kuba and I, we are working on an article that talks about the service that we provide to students. And then we're going to publish that article for people to know, other schools to know the service that we provide, and the positive side and the negative side, so that they will learn from it. So you don't only do your research, you have to share with the people in the research community and the profession, so that they will learn from it. As you are also going to learn from other people. When you encounter a problem, look at the literature and see what has been done, best practices, and then you use those information to help you to do your research. So
there's a question
yes.
That came in, and I think you may have partly addressed this with the examples you're giving, but what are the best steps to develop the plan? What points should we make sure to address when developing our solution plan?
This presentation didn't cover that, but I think that what you have to think about is that, so based on the plan might be kind of, we call it, you can learn more about it like program planning, right? It's like you are planning a program or planning an intervention. So if you are planning an intervention, you have to think about, so who are you developing an intervention for, right? What are their specific needs? How are the solution going to help them? What specific problem that you want to use it to solve? How are you going to implement it in terms of specific actions that you're going to take? So let's say if you are going to give them a training, you're going to train mental health professional concerning new technique. How are you going to do it in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks? How will the curriculum look like? The training material look like? How are you going to present the content of the training to your audience? So this is like step-by-step specific actions that you're going to take to implement those actions. But I didn't cover it here. Maybe another time I'll focus on, developing an action plan. I think that's very good. And also think about program evaluation. So thank you for your question. So for your dissertation, what you could do is that after coming up with your solution, you can come up with, it looks like recommendation per se, like you are recommending based on the findings. So you can describe that kind of what should maybe future professionals do in this area, or what do you think you're going to do based on these results, right? So it's not going to be like a very structured way, but for your dissertation, you can just make a recommendation trying to describe what needs to be done based on the findings. Any other question for me?
Not so much questions. There are definitely some comments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess we kind of did a SWOT analysis, a little bit informal, but there, was certainly good information on there on strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. What else? Oh, and then I guess if you could send a development plan over to Vernita.
Oh, okay. So I'll look for that information and send it to you. And if I forget, please email me. I'll be happy to respond. Sometimes a lot of things going on. So any other question for me? Okay, so if not, I think that we can end this presentation, and thank you for your time. And as you could contact us, and we'll be happy to address all your problems you have. You can email us, the nk.me, I didn't bring the dot, at thechicagoschool.edu. And you can email me personally, and now you can follow me on Twitter, @drphilipedu. I have a lot of information that I can share with you if you can follow me. If we don't have any questions, then thank you for your time, and I really appreciate. And thank you, Dr. Leahy, for coming. I really appreciate you coming to listen. So then we can end this. Thank you. Bye.